Welcome to the Destiny of Manufacturing podcast. Brought to you today by Longevity Industries. I am your host, Dean Phillips. I am very fortunate today. I have with me TJ Tennent, and he comes to us from Tennent and Associates, where he is, of course, the owner and president. TJ, welcome.
Hi, Dean. How are you doing? Thank you for inviting me this morning.
Great to have you, sir. It's a beautiful day. It's an opportunity to kick off the week when we're recording this, and tell us a little bit about your view of 5 years into the future of manufacturing.
Wow, 5 years into the future of manufacturing. As you know, I am a tire specialist. Some people might even consider me an expert, but I hadn't talked to my wife about that yet. But things are changing so rapidly now in the automotive industry. And, of course, tires are part of the automotive industry. And when I think about tires in the automotive industry, I think about consumer electronics. Back when I was in high school and even college, there were no cell phones. Everyone, literally, my 17-year-old has a cell phone now.
Yeah.
We've gone from VHS to Betamax to the 12-inch disc. Now everybody is on, Hulu and everything else that's electronically done. I don't know if there are even any music stores left where you can actually buy a CD, or I'm showing my age, a cassette tape or anything like that. So,
yeah.
So with tires, and looking just not even 5 years, just 3 to 5 years into the future, the destiny of the automobile is changing. And what I mean by that is everyone now, the hot thing is hybrids or electric vehicles. There are electric vehicles that can outrun internal combustion vehicles, namely Tesla, outrunning Ferraris and Lamborghinis.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're moving quite quickly toward autonomous vehicles. And I love driving. So I'm not a fan of autonomous vehicles. I understand the principle where the vehicles talk to each other and all that. So because of those vehicles, the likelihood of them existing is very high. The likelihood of them being hybrid or even more so electric is going to involve a tire that is designed to run with a vehicle that drives differently than you or I would operate that vehicle. So where I like a lot of throttle action, these new vehicles probably won't participate in that because they'll be more conservative energy-wise, whether they're on hybrid or electrical systems. So tires are going to have to are going to have to evolve to work efficiently and effectively and at a high level of quality on a vehicle such as that.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that that's more of performance? When you talk about performance, I think sometimes people think of it as just a flat, direct line when you talk about performance. And I don't know if that's quite true. I think sometimes it depends on the vehicle, depends on where you're driving it, depends on the conditions. Is there such a thing as one size fits all?
No, there is no such animal that exists. And not only that, the technology for such an animal does not exist. And let's look at from the inception of tires. Back in, I think, 1845, a guy named Robert Thompson got the first pneumatic tire approved and patented to go on a horse-drawn carriage, and I think he called them aerial wheels or something like that. They'd only run about 1,200 miles. And they were unbelievably expensive. Only the ultra-rich could afford them, and they were made for this carriage called an English Brougham or something like that. And we get to today where we've got tires on commercial vehicles. Of course, they sort of had commercial carriages back then, but we've got commercial vehicles, we've got passenger and light truck tires, we've got motorcycle tires, aircraft tires, tires for mining equipment. There's all this other stuff. So when I talk about performance with a tire, that is going to be very specific to the application and the vehicle. So if you've got a Corvette, you expect something very different out of that tire than you would out of a Cadillac. Mm-hmm. The expectations of the owners are different, and it's up to the tire manufacturers to keep up with those demands to try to understand what their customers want. And today, I would have to say, and I didn't work for this company, I would have to say that Goodyear is probably the leader in tire innovation with a lot of the products and concept tires and equipment that they've developed in the last couple of years. And they're developing everything from tires made from soy oil to tires that actually develop electricity by being operated on the vehicle and transferring that electricity back to the hybrid system or the electrical system of the vehicle. So I would have to say that their innovative team is really a couple of steps ahead of everyone else today. But
yeah.
That could change.
Wow, that's pretty interesting to hear that regeneration of those tires. You know, I sometimes think of things in the terms of a flywheel, that when you're operating it, kind of maintaining that energy level. And people sometimes will use that, and they'll develop the force back into and take the electricity back into the battery. And it's a pretty interesting perspective. So I'm looking forward to when we have more of that kind of thing. That's
yeah, and sort of, if you follow F1 at all, they have a braking system that regenerates electricity in some of the very high end automotive hybrid vehicles, the Ferrari, LaFerrari and stuff like that, do that today. But there are other concepts that are out there, like the airless tires, which are basically rubber, and they have this rubber mesh in them. Actually, Polaris has some of those tires, and I think Michelin has it. It's called a Tweel, the Michelin Tweel, that's on some of the Polaris ATVs that are for sale right now. Mm-hmm. But the problem with using those in an automotive application is that they have to be, the reason you put air in the tire is so that you can adjust the load carrying capability of the tire for load. And of course, with the Tweel, you cannot do that. But Goodyear's done a good job. They've got a tire that's got moss in it that actually cleans the air while you're operating the tire.
Wow.
And even Continental has kind of gotten into the game, and they've got a tire now that's a concept tire that's got microprocessors that adjust tread depth and groove depth and even contact patch of the tire for different weather conditions in rain or snow or ice and things like that. So there's just a lot of stuff out there. NASA's kind of gotten into the tire game themselves unofficially, and I don't think they planned on that, but that's the way it happened, is they developed a tire for some of the new rovers that are going to be on the new moon missions and on Mars that don't use any rubber components. They use a steel mesh as the belt, and they use body plies that are similar to what a conventional tire uses today, but this tire, it's designed to go across rocky and uneven roads. Well, not really roads, because there are no roads on the moon or Mars, but surface textures and operate efficiently. So there's a lot of different things happening, and I'm really excited about the direction that the innovation with tires is going.
Yeah. I can remember a scene in the movie Days of Thunder when they're talking about tires, and he kept telling that you're burning up the tires, you're melting them because you're riding too fast. And I can remember that the tires, and I think that he was adjusting the way he's driving to make the tires last longer. And so many of the manufacturers are trying to make the tires adjust to the driver and their driving performance. I remember on Discovery Channel, they had a couple different scenarios, what it's like to drive and how less fuel efficient you are depending on your driving style, how many times you stop and start if you're distracted. And I'm looking forward to some of the improvements that you see with autonomous vehicles, which have much more consistency and doesn't have that starting, stopping, and dealing with the way a driver personality even has.
Yeah, even now, even on the commercial side, if you've got a long haul type vehicle, you can buy a conventional commercial truck tire, and that would be a steer, drive, or a trailer tire. And you can also buy a tire that's fuel efficient for a commercial vehicle. That will give you a little bit better fuel economy. And the fuel economy on a commercial vehicle, and I'm going to try to make it not too complex, is divided up in three areas, and that would be aerodynamics and the drivetrain and the tire. And since it's not always easy to redesign the aerodynamics of a commercial truck or even the drivetrain and the drive apparatus, it's easier to redesign the sidewall of the tire so that you use less kinetic energy by having less flex in the sidewall and that kind of thing. It gives you a little bit better fuel economy. That's the easiest way to do it. But I guess I'm kind of a weird guy because I do get excited about new technologies like that.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, but you've seen the commercials with the insurance companies where they put this little thing in your CAN bus in your car, and they can determine your driving habits. Well, a lot of the tire manufacturers do those actual tests in the real world right now to determine the characteristics of human driving behavior versus autonomous vehicle driving behavior, which actually helps them determine how to develop a tire because the behaviors are very different, believe it or not.
I believe
that will help them develop a tire that works efficiently and gives you the mileage and all the other things that you want in an autonomous vehicle. But there's other things to think about too. People may not want to, when I grew up, nobody leased a vehicle. People lease cars now. There's a lot of manufacturers kind of kicking around ideas. Well, would it be better to lease tires? And that way they can come in and we take care of all the service and that kind of thing on the tire. And when they're done, maybe we can reuse the casing or something like that. So there's a ton of different ideas out there. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Demolition Man with Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes. That movie was back in 1993, and they had a vehicle that you could drive manually, but most people put it in autonomous mode, and I can't remember the phrase that they spoke, and the vehicle drove itself. But that was not that long ago. That was 27 years ago, and it was a sci-fi movie, and today it is reality.
Yeah.
That Tesla has cars right now on the road that can be pretty much driven. They're still working some of the bugs out, but they can be driven autonomously. So it's really important that the tire manufacturers try to keep up with all the technology that's out there. And they do partner a lot with the automotive manufacturers to develop original equipment products for those vehicles. But technology, as I said earlier, before with cell phones and DVD players and all that stuff phased in and phased out in less than my lifetime.
Yeah.
I would be interested to live another 30 years to see what a vehicle is going to be like. Maybe they won't even be using tires. A lot of companies now are testing and developing personal air and land vehicles. Some people call them PALs, where they can fly like a gyrocopter or maybe even a helicopter or even some of the drones that are out now. And they have the capability of operating as a conventional vehicle. And that technology is moving quite quickly as well.
You'd mentioned earlier about the way the tires are designed and things like rolling resistance. What is being done to try and optimize that?
Wow, that's a great question. Rolling resistance on a tire is determined by compound, tread pattern, and the sidewall flex and those kinds of things. And those are the majority of low rolling resistant tires are on hybrid or electric vehicles. Now, one of the things that your listening audience may not know is that if you purchase one of the many hybrid vehicles that are available to you now, if you decide to go away from the green, and they call them green tires because they save energy and fuel, but they're low rolling resistance products, and everyone has them, all the major tire manufacturers. If you were to decide to put a cheaper tire or a conventional tire and go away from the low rolling resistance or the green tire on your hybrid vehicle, you will actually hurt the fuel economy of that vehicle, because now you've gone to a tire that has very low rolling resistance to a tire now that has significantly more rolling resistance. And this actually happened to a friend of mine. He didn't have a whole lot of money, so he put some cheap third-tier conventional tires on his Prius. And he called me and said, "Hey, man, I took my vehicle back to the Honda place," and they said, well, it was a Toyota, it was a Prius. And he said the fuel economy dropped, it dropped like 20%. And I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And they told me it was the tires. Is that true? And I said, well, what tires do you have on there? And we went through that whole shebang, and it wound up that he had gone away from a green tire or a more fuel efficient tire to a conventional tire, and hurt his fuel economy. So I don't know how readily available that type of information is to the public. I wish it was available, and I'm sure it's in the owner's manual of those products and those vehicles. But to the consumer that would purchase a vehicle like that secondhand, that information may or may not be readily available.
Right. Well, you say that, and I look at one of the things historically that changed in vehicles was when they put the catalytic converter on. And everybody says how much that improved, I guess, how much got put back into the environment. And while that's true, we also hurt the fuel economy, which also hurts the environment. So it's a catch-22 there, and people kind of manipulate the numbers, whatever suits them. But we used to have Honda vehicles that could get close to 50 miles to the gallon. And then we put the catalytic converters on, and they drop down into the 30s. And so is that necessarily the best solution? I think in the long run it is. And of course, with electric vehicles, it's going to be pretty much not even a concern from that standpoint. I think that we're heading in that direction anyways, from everything that I see, and maybe you see things differently, but it's an interesting time for vehicles, and how much better the environment is because of these vehicles have improved so much over the years. There's just, I can remember just going down the road in the 70s in my parents' vehicle, and it's just just so bad, the what was spewing out of that in buses, and if you lived in the city, it's very different. And now you just don't see that. You don't, and like I said, the technology is moving so fast. It would be difficult for a small tire company to keep up with what's going on. And one of the things, other than technology, that the tire manufacturers is having the trouble keeping up with is balancing cost of these new technologies and inventions with what consumers are willing to pay. So one of the things in the motorcycle world is, how come you guys can't build us a tire that'll give us 20,000, 30, 40,000 miles, like what I get out of my car or my pickup truck? Well, you've got a different contact patch, different handling and steering dynamics. And because safety is number one when it comes to motorcycles, keeping you upright, we have to give you a tire with a higher rolling resistance to keep you upright. So what a lot of them do is this thing called riding the dark side, where they place a passenger car tire on the rear of the motorcycle, which that is incorporating some other things that we don't even have time to get into right now.
But the technology does exist to give them 20, 30, 40, 50, 100,000 miles. But the problem is the technology does not exist to give them the same level of traction and friction on the road. So that's the balancing act that they're playing on the motorcycle side. And then on the passenger and light truck side, even on the light truck side, now developing the technologies which will have load cells on the vehicle. So when you load up the vehicle, whether it's a pickup truck or a dump truck or something like that, where the CPU understands that there's more load being added to the vehicle so that there's more pressure put into the tire to carry that load up into the maximum load carrying capacity and things like that. So all those things right there are concepts that have been invented and are ready probably today to put into the marketplace. But the drawback to any new technology is always going to be cost. And how much is it going to increase the cost of the vehicles? And that cost can be decreased somewhat in numbers, but with the newness of some of the technologies that are out there, the numbers still won't justify the great increase or the significant increase in the cost of having the tires installed.
Yeah. Yep. And that is when you're looking at buying new tires, that is a huge percentage of the total cost. I mean, you look at even on the low cost sides as a percentage, it's, a lot of times it can be 25% or more even, getting mounting, balancing and all of that.
It can be quite expensive. And if you've got a government fleet or even a rental car fleet, any kind of fleet, I mean, or other than fuel and the price of the vehicle and labor costs, tires is going to be one of those big costs in the top three up there to keep your fleet running. And fleets are always looking for opportunities. And one of the things that came from some of that, and I'll give you an example, back in the late 70s, early 80s. Remember when Ford and Firestone had the thing with the Firestone ATX recall, Wilderness ATX, and the Ford Explorers. One of the really good things that came out of that was the tire pressure monitoring systems. Mm-hmm. And all the tire and vehicle manufacturers were forced to move to a tire pressure monitoring system, which after I think August of 2007, all vehicles were required to have a TPMS system installed on them, and now allows consumers to not only get not just an idiot light saying, hey, you need to check because one of your tires is low. It gives you the actual location of the tire, what the actual pressure is, and it even records in most cases tire temperatures and things like that, so that the consumer can understand what's going on with their tires. And sometimes when you have something bad like that happens, something good comes out of it, and the TPMS systems back in that 2007 requirement by NHTSA was a good requirement, and one of the few things that the federal government actually got right, because they messed it up a lot. But sometimes when you have something like that, something good comes out of it. And fortunately, that a lot of people paid for that with their lives, and we don't want that to happen. But it's good that the tire and vehicle manufacturers paid attention to you didn't have much of a choice because everyone else was too. But they did come up with some concepts to try to prevent those types of things from happening in the future.
Right. The other thing that I thought that was really very helpful across manufacturing when that happened was the traceability. And that was, at least from what I can recall, was one of the problems was that as part of that recall, they couldn't trace all of it.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because this is something else that everyone really should make sure happens that I've found very rarely happens. There is a card that you should fill out when you purchase your tires, and that card is actually sent back into the tire manufacturers so that if there is a recall, they notify you direct. Otherwise, hopefully you're reading a newspaper or getting some type of an alert that there's a recall on your vehicle. With your vehicle, it's much easier because the vehicle's registered and there's a trail of who owns it and who owned it before and that kind of thing, which is captured by the government. But with tires, that isn't necessarily done. So one of the things that all consumers should make sure that they do is fill that little card out so that they can be contacted if there is a recall on the products that they're using. Gotcha. It's just really important. But very rarely is anyone even offered that card to fill out when they purchase their tires. And if you purchase them online, I mean, that's a totally different game all in itself.
Right.
But one of the things that a lot of the tire manufacturers are doing now is having tires built overseas. And that, just to bring up the coronavirus thing and all that's going on now. So if this goes in the archives, maybe somebody can come back and listen to this 20, 30 years from now, what was going on. But because most of the tires are made in Asia, in China, believe it or not, almost all tire manufacturers make at least 50% or more of their products in China now. Wow. With the dispute that was going on over taxes and import taxes, some of the tire manufacturers had to readjust what their production here in the States and determine what they were going to try to make to get caught up, because it would cost them more at this point now to get the tires made in China, which they had contracts and all those kinds of things. So also one of the other things that consumers don't think about is when there's a slowdown in the economy, one of the first things people don't buy is cars. And when those cars are sitting on the lot, there's some policies and procedures that should be done. They should move the vehicles around every 3 to 6 months, and they should air up the tires to maximum PSI so the tires don't develop flat spotting. Mm-hmm. And if they do develop flat spotting, there are procedures in-house already for the tire manufacturers to take care of those consumers. But because the net profitability of these manufacturers it's so razor thin that they used to do all 4 tires simultaneously. Now they will only do 2, and hopefully the dealer will take care of the other 2 so that the customer gets 4 new tires on there for the tires not operating properly through no fault of the customer. So the customers may have to look out for something like that now when they buy a new vehicle, especially if that vehicle's been on the lot more than 6 months. Mm-hmm.
So tell me, how did you get involved in manufacturing and in the tire business?
Wow. I'm going to have to give you the Reader's Digest version of that story. I have a degree in electrical engineering from a small university in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And I was through our previous conversations, I don't sleep very much. I only sleep a few hours a day, cumulatively. And I went to school for electrical engineering. I have a degree I'm a double E, electrical engineer. And I worked at a nuclear power plant while I was under construction at night. So I worked there from 11 at night till 7 a.m. Then I went to school from 8 to 4 and did that for 5 years. I graduated and started working as a process engineer at a chemical plant. Did that for, 14, 15 years. And so I understood polymers and compounds and pressures and temperatures and things like that. Even though I didn't go to school for that, I really enjoyed learning about those kinds of things. Went through a really bad divorce, moved to Dallas, Texas, kind of flopped around from here and there, worked in orthopedic plastics and skylights, which is a weird combination, but I did do that until a headhunter. So I know a lot about prosthesis and prosthetics and plastics and compounds used for that stuff. And a headhunter called me and asked me about coming to work for Bridgestone Firestone as a field engineer. And I said, how did you get my information? She said, some website or something. And I said, I'll interview. And I interviewed for the job, and they made an offer. And I started working as a field engineer and doing R&D on passenger and light truck and commercial tires in the central U.S., which is a great area because there's rapid wear in Texas and people drive for 100 miles an hour between Dallas and Houston for 4 hours. So I learned a lot very quickly about tires. And then the recall hit, and part of my job was to fly around to where there was a rollover and work with local law enforcement, investigate what happened, whether it was related to manufacturing related or it was maintenance related or something else that maybe wasn't involved with the tire. It could have been a road hazard or something. I worked very closely with the legal department for Bridgestone Firestone North America. Then I was promoted and came to the corporate office here in Nashville. And one of my first tasks was to develop a winning dirt oval kart tire that Firestone could sell. And we did that in about 18 months or so. We developed a tire. And one of the things that I learned about developing products and testing was that the people, and we had this in our conversation as well, the people who don't like your products are the people that give you the best information on what you should produce and why.
Yeah.
And so I went around the track and I talked to everybody. And of course, it was easy because nobody used our product back then, and said, what don't you like about it? And all of them gave me some great ideas. And, you know, I don't take credit for developing that tire, but it became our first and only winning Firestone tire back then. And then got into open wheel racing and the IRL and all that stuff, and motorcycle racing, and then moved from there to government products. So I've worked with every kind of tire that Bridgestone Firestone makes, which is everything. I mean, everything from a $45 lawnmower tire to a $450,000 earth-moving tire, and learned a lot about production and sales and marketing and how those things work until I retired a couple of years ago and started my own company.
Wow. That's a long way to come from being an electrical engineer.
You know, it is a very, very long way from being an electrical engineer. And, you know, I never thought about working in the tire industry or the automotive industry in any way. And it's been very good for me having contacts within all the automotive manufacturers and contacts with almost everyone who makes tires, or even who doesn't make them domestically, makes them internationally here and sells them here in the U.S. And the thing with the Firestone recall got me involved in law enforcement and working with law enforcement and crash and investigation and that kind of stuff, which kind of peeled off to what Tennent, the bread and butter of what Tennent and Associates does. But it also allows us to train and certify law enforcement in tire forensics, and train in insurance claims agents, and even certify emergency vehicle technicians, who are the guys who work on fire trucks and stuff like that. So it's very much a niche market, and we are global. I was on the phone, not on the phone, but emailing back and forth this morning with some people in Australia and that. But me and the guys who work with me in our company, all of them are extremely passionate about, they love tires. And it's kind of funny because when we're out working, partnering with fleets or other tire manufacturer, or whoever we're partnering with, whoever wanted to use our services, are amazed at how passionate we are about what we do. And for us, it's something we would probably do even if we weren't getting paid. Of course, don't anybody take me, to task on that, because you're gonna get an invoice. But it's nice because they laugh at us because we're so excited to see stuff that we've never seen before. And the key to being successful in business is in what we do, especially when you have to go to court and do all these other things or prevent people from going to court, is having the skills, the technical expertise to understand what's going on and why. But even more so than that, having the ability to speak to a layman and have them understand what happened without having them scratch their head and say, I have no clue what that guy is talking about.
Right. Yep. I've got a question now is, do you feel that the tire side of the business is becoming more of the IoT, the Internet of Things kind of sensors and traceability and tracking of what's happening on the vehicle now in the automotive world. Do you think that the sensor side of it is really becoming so much more important to track how those tires are performing?
Wow, Dean, that's a great. I can't believe no one has ever asked me that before. But the answer is yes. Because you can't determine what's going on with tires and how to improve them without data. And with any form of business, data is the way that you should make decisions. Well, data is one piece of the pie, and it's a big piece of the pie. But determining whether the tire was run with insufficient air pressure to carry the load, whether the tire was run in a situation where it became overheated, whether it's a right tire for the application. All those things are being tracked, and there are technologies that everyone right now, before on the commercial side and kind of on the consumer side, Michelin was the leader, even more than Goodyear is in innovation. Michelin was the leader in tire tracking with tire tags and things like that, and putting manufacturing the tires with sensors mounted internally of the tires, especially on fleets when they drove back in. The information would be wirelessly transmitted to a database where they could track and see what was going on. But to answer your question, yes, that is going to be more and more important for the tire manufacturers to understand what the products are doing in the field versus what changes they should make to compensate for maybe pieces that are not as efficient as they should be.
Gotcha. Well, we're just about out of time here, TJ. Can you tell us a little bit about where somebody can get a hold of you?
Yes. We don't advertise. We don't market because we're a small team and we're unbelievably busy, but we do accommodate everybody. The easiest way to contact me is by email, and my email address is almost obvious. It's the Tire Guy, and tire spelled with a Y. So it's TheTyregui @yahoo.com. And we spell tire with a Y because it's only spelled with an I in the U.S., and we are global.
Huh.
But they can also contact me by phone at 615-636-8136. Or if they're not sure, they can actually just Google TJ Tennent, and they can contact me on all forms of social media: Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. We're literally all over the place. Or you can probably contact your local state law enforcement, who's probably been trained by us, and they will know who we are almost instinctively or have been trained by us.
Great.
So, but yeah, even if they just have questions, they're welcome to contact me and say, hey, I got a question. I don't need your services, but I have a question. And that question could be on anything from a lawnmower tire to an aircraft tire, and we will have an answer before we get off the phone.
Excellent. Well, thank you, TJ, for being here today. We really appreciate it. Everybody go out and make it a great day.